Come to the good taste of Chi-Chi's. Incredible. Come to the good times of Chi-Chi's. Incredible. Come to the fun and flavor of Mexico you like best. Chi-Chi serves more good food, more good times, to more good people. Come to America's incredible Mexican restaurant. Wish I'd gone there. Chi-Chi's.
Chi-Chi's. Oh yeah, getting into a whole new industry. Restaurants. We haven't gotten into restaurants yet, so I'm a little excited, because this is a very different kind of market. We've talked about retail, we've talked about railroads, we've talked about corporate corruption, we've talked about a lot of things, but restaurants are a whole new ball game. Doubtless the vast majority, if not all of you, are well aware of what a restaurant is. It's a place where you go and eat food. And the thing about being a restaurant is that there's a whole new list of things to worry about. But at the core, you want to give people good food that they'll enjoy and want to pay for and come back again to enjoy another time. And if you don't do that, Gordon Ramsay will yell at you.
Why are you taking my product?
They're molding you. I'm struggling here to stay in this building right now. I swear to God.
It's like it's been left out for days and it's been attacked by cats.
What I've just eaten has been an embarrassment.
But being a restaurant, there's a lot of other factors to consider. Because unless you're a fast food chain, which I consider a slightly separate industry when compared to the typical restaurant, atmosphere is also important, as well as service. You need friendly hostess and waiting staff, a nice atmosphere to enjoy your food, things that keep the customer coming back. And there's plenty of themes when it comes to certain restaurants. Old school diners, classic style home cooking, country, and of course, Australian? Well, it works, so whatever. Though it does lead into today's topic. Because naturally, as a part of the theming, the type of food a restaurant serves can be thematic as well, generally differentiated between country or cultural background. In Chi-Chi's case, it was Mexican style. Mexican food is popular even outside of Mexico, and Chi-Chi's was one of many restaurants that chose that particular specialty. And for a long time, they were actually quite good at it. The food was good. I've actually eaten at Chi-Chi's before, at least in my youth. They also had the best grilled cheese I've ever had, and it took me 20 years to figure out what they actually put in it. It's cheddar and Swiss. It was delicious. But Chi-Chi's is no longer around, at least in restaurant form. What happened to them? If the food was good, and the atmosphere was handled well, and it was, from what I remember, at least the one that I went to, why did they wind up failing? Well, the other thing about restaurants is that product quality is exceedingly important when it comes to them. In other business avenues, like retail, product quality is, well, important, but not quite as important in the sense of the, shall we say, safety. If you go to, say, Walmart and buy something, anything but the food, because we're talking about food. So you buy something other than food, if you take it home and it doesn't work, you return it. You exchange it for another one that actually works, or you get a refund. I'm sure most of you have probably had to do that once or twice. But if you get bad quality at a restaurant, best case scenario, the food isn't good and you never go back again. Worst case scenario, as such, quality control is exceedingly important when it comes to any kind of food, especially in restaurants. Serving a dish that poisons a person is a death blow for a restaurant chain, especially if it makes, say, national news. And that's kind of what happened to Chi-Chi's. Though when their case happened, they were already in bankruptcy. They were already on a decline. So there's more to the story than just, we managed to poison a bunch of people. Also, kill 4 of them. Yeah, this is getting dark, I know. Chi-Chi's was started all the way back in 1976 by 2 men, a restaurateur, Marno McDermott, and a former member of the Green Bay Packers. Yeah, seriously, Max McGee. He was an end and punter for the Packers from 1954 to 1967. And they both started the restaurant, which McDermott named Chi-Chi's after his wife, whose nickname was Chichi. Now, it's important to mention though, Chichi does mean something in Mexican slang. And doubtless, the majority of my Mexican audience has been laughing their butts off this whole time, because ignorant non-Spanish speakers are completely unaware of what Chi-Chi's actually meant, and none of the sources make it clear whether or not McDermott or McGee knew what Chi-Chi's meant. Chi-Chi's is a term in Mexican slang that refers to a woman's... how do I put this in a way where YouTube doesn't demonetize me? a woman's assets. Yeah. Again, not sure if they knew that, but they certainly didn't lean into it. Their waitstaff wasn't dressed provocatively or anything, and at least one of my sources mentioned that this wasn't a good name because of that, but I kind of resist it on the basis that Hooters exists. I mean, restaurants have gotten away with that kind of thing before, but Chi-Chi's didn't actually take advantage of it. They seem to just like the catchy name, which it is, but I just have the sneaking suspicion that Mexican immigrants may have seen the restaurants and gone inside thinking it might have been an entirely different kind of establishment, if you get my meaning. Anywho, the first location opened at 7717 Nicollet Avenue South in Richfield, Minnesota, and the reason they chose Mexican as the theme was for two reasons. A, McDermott had already founded a fast food Mexican chain that was originally called Zapata, but later renamed to Zantigo, which was eventually merged with Taco Bell until being re-established as a brand later, though they only have 4 locations, so it's possible a lot of you don't even know what they are. But back in the late 70s, Mexican food was actually on the rise in popularity in America, and Minnesota was lacking in terms of Mexican establishments, meaning that creating a restaurant specializing in that type of food was actually a very good call. One of the big elements of having a successful restaurant is focusing on local demand. You have a kind of food. You want to sell that kind of food. You want to build a restaurant in a place that is lacking in places that are already selling that kind of food. Or alternatively, the only available kind of place is significantly lower quality. It is very imperative that you give people a reason to come into your doors, because going to restaurants is generally more expensive than eating at home. It's a time and monetary investment. But if the experience is good and the food is good, and it's a unique one for the area, you generally wind up with success. And in Chi-Chi's case, that is exactly what happened at first. The Minnesota locations did really well and they began to expand. From 1977 to 1986, the chain was managed by Shelley Frank, who was a former executive of KFC. An interesting choice in management since, okay, I mean, fast food restaurants are restaurants, but like I said, I do consider them a separate category, because when people go to fast food restaurants, they expect something a lot different than, say, regular restaurants. You expect the food to be decent, but you're getting it quick, it's usually cheaper, there's usually no waiters unless you're Sonic. But then again, it's still food, so there is some overlap. But Frank turned out to be pretty good at his job. The chain began to expand, and even after him they still expanded. By March of 1995, they had 210 locations, which is pretty good, but this kind of expansion is risky, especially with restaurants. You don't want to do that too quickly, and you want to be very sure that where you're putting the new locations actually needs them, and this was Chi-Chi's biggest problem early on, and continued to be. Competition. There were a lot of other restaurants in the area. When they first started out in the Midwest, they were doing really well, but once they moved outside of there, they got slammed by the competition. Other restaurants like Olive Garden and Texas Roadhouse proved much more popular, and if there were already Mexican food establishments, whether they were chains or independent, they often overshadowed Chi-Chi's, meaning that in places like New York or the Deep South, they got rolled and didn't turn a profit. By the late 90s, they had started closing down locations, and their last owners, while they were still in business in both the US and Canada, was a company called Prandium Incorporated. This was probably a red flag, because Prandium in and of themselves had already filed for bankruptcy several times. They did it in 1993 and in 2002. Naturally, they didn't manage Chi-Chi's any better than they managed themselves, and by 2002, the number of Chi-Chi's locations had dropped to just 144. Still not bad, but they were definitely on the way out, and they would file for bankruptcy on October 8th, 2003. With even their flagship restaurant in Richfield, Minnesota, being put up for sale. But this probably wouldn't have been the end of them. Chi-Chi's was a known brand by this point, and their food was actually pretty good. There were people that liked them. They just needed to downsize, reorient themselves. They could have theoretically survived this bankruptcy, if only they hadn't managed to murder 4 people and sicken 660 others. Welcome to the world of Hepatitis A.
Ring around the rosy, pocket full of roses, and swish y'all down.
If you ate at this Chi-Chi's anytime within the last 14 days, the health message is See your doctor.
Hepatitis A is an infectious disease of the liver, caused by hepatovirus A, or HAV. A lot of cases are asymptomatic, but when they are symptomatic, the symptoms are
Oh my god, my insides are on fire!
nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, jaundice, fever, and abdominal pain. 10 to 15% of people can also experience a recurrence of symptoms during the 6 months after the initial infection, and in rare cases, particularly with the elderly, the disease can cause acute liver failure, which, mind you, is what we call fatal. It's a pretty gross and serious condition, and an outbreak of hepatitis A in 2003 was one of the most widespread outbreaks in United States history. It occurred in northeastern Ohio and southwestern Pennsylvania, and the outbreak was traced back to a Chi-Chi's. Just one Chi-Chi's, it wasn't the whole chain. It was only the location in Monica, Pennsylvania, but it made national news and tainted the public's opinion of the entire chain. Because in the restaurant business, it's one thing to manage yourself poorly and need to reorient yourself, even entering bankruptcy. Like I said, they probably could have gotten out of it. But if you manage to get a whole bunch of people sick, not just one or two, I mean 640 people at least, and kill 4 of them, you can't come back from that. Whether it's just one location or all of them, your name is now associated with the fact that you got hepatitis A. It was specifically their green onions, which were sourced in Mexico, but they were tainted with the disease. And by tainted with the disease, I mean one of the ways you can get hepatitis A is by eating food that's contaminated with the virus, but specifically infected feces. There was feces infected with Hep A on the onions they were serving to...
Who wants chowder?
There was no coming back from this. It was impossible. They did settle all the Hep A lawsuits by July of 2004, and by that time, they only had 65 restaurants left. On September 18th, they closed down all those locations, and Outback Steakhouse wound up purchasing 76 of the properties. They wanted to convert those into their own restaurants, but they didn't wind up doing that. They eventually sold the majority of them to Kimco Realty Corporation, and that was the end of Chi-Chi's, at least when it came to the restaurants in America and Canada. But they do still live on in restaurant form across the pond. The news of the Hep A thing didn't really make it there, nor affect it at all. In 2002, Francis Leroy of Belgium purchased the master franchise, well, for Belgium, and later the ones for the whole of Europe in 2008. Then in North Africa for 2011, and China in 2012. They did well for a few years, but eventually suffered a sharp decline. Based on sources, it seems there's only a handful of locations left. As of 2022, there were 3, but one's closed down since then. All of them are in Belgium, and at least one source says there's only 1 left there, the last bastion of the Chi-Chi's restaurant chain. However, the brand lives on in another category, grocery stores. Not like a whole grocery named Chi-Chi's. I mean, there are Chi-Chi's products in grocery stores using that name. In 1987, Hormel Foods acquired the rights to produce and market salsa and related products under the Chi-Chi's brand in the United States. Those products, for one thing, have not made anybody sick to my knowledge, so that's nice, and actually did really well. To this day, you can still find them in grocery stores, though in the modern day they're not produced directly by Hormel. In 2009, Hormel formed a 50-50 joint venture with an actual Mexican company, Herdez del Fuerte. This 50-50 split company is known as Megamex Foods, and they manufacture and distribute all the Mexican food products under Hormel in the United States. Chi-Chi's naturally fell under that, along with other brands like Herdez and La Victoria. But yeah, you can still get Chi-Chi's food in the technical sense, but not from the restaurant, unless you're in Belgium apparently. And regardless of where you go, ideally none of them involve hepatitis A. And with that, a special thank you to all my underwater train finders, Some Dude 267, Benjamin Owens, Anzac A1, Arthur Roy, Jack Carson's Railroad Videos, Lord R 444, Isaac Fur 1405, Charles Kwiatkowski, Matt Weaver, Tom Redlion, NS Productions 8104, Wheeljack 8401, Rescues Greyhounds, The Baxter, Caleb Crosswhite, Josh Johnson, Caleb Rainwaters, Prez Drenton, Master of None, Travis Delinsky, JBL Explorers, Tommy Rossini, Ben McCullough, Panzer Kitson 131-232, Mark Holding, Mr. Terevel, Hayden DeGrow, No, Kurt Forkum, Mr. Sleepy, Harry, Drew Debris, George Kenny, Kevin Wood, Liam Wright, Hendrick Motorsports Fan 5, Hannah Bird, Duraushi, A Person 723, William Nemo, Dr. Razor 78, Shimasu, Metal for Life Guy, Andrew Bowen, Crimson Rose, Ryan Wehofer, Jared Brussel, Zintac M, Boss K, Orange Glass, Andy, The Conceptualist, Acoletti, Ohio Trucker 1, Windy City Rails, John Vidiola, AET Museum, NJ 1969, and of course, my dad. Till next time, this is Darkness, individual of fun. Farewell.